I guess I could be grammatical about this and say that one thing I'm really focusing on a lot these days is getting out of subjunctive play, right? What would,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Can I? Would I? Would it? Wouldn't he have done this? That sort of thing. Now, let's clarify a little bit. As chit chat in a fairly solid procedure, any of those phrases are actually fun and sometimes helpful. The player X is rocketing forward, and another player says, "Hey, wouldn't the dog be jumping in about right now?" And the player's like, "Oh yeah, holy shit, yeah, okay, I'm going to use the vassal point for the dog. That's awesome, right?"
Mm.
What's wrong with that? The answer is nothing. What's wrong with that if it crisscrosses player and GM? Nothing. The GM is like, wow, there's some consequences here, aren't there? It's like this, and the player, masochistic as we sometimes are, says, and then wouldn't the lava come down too? Right?
Mhm.
And the GM is like, why? You have a point. It would, in
Mhm.
fact, right? So none of
Yeah.
that is bad, but it's not negotiation. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's right, and I think that's a critical issue. So I have this idea that we can permit the ordinary talk that may go on at a given table.
Mhm.
Um, with all of its, and in my opinion, it's usually fairly positive effects. And if the table is particularly socially functional, then whoever does have the authority the moment at some point says, hold on, everybody, be quiet a second. I'm trying to do this. Right. And that can happen too.
Mhm.
But none of it is a how about putting the other person on the spot to revise what they what they were saying at that moment.
I
So
see.
it's not
Yeah.
speculative. It's totally provisional until the person with authority adopts it. But it's not speculative and moving the activity of what is being said, into a state of negotiation. Just because you said it doesn't mean I have to listen, right? It's difficult to identify. I wish we had English words to state the difference between a procedure with forward momentum in which casual chatter, is productive, as opposed to a procedure in which the forward momentum is either suspended or rescinded as part
Mhm.
of how we do it.
So, okay. So, what about since you were just talking about that? So what about a situation where because when we play, um, I like to put that out there when we're kind of when we're going slower, we're not in the combat
Right.
or
Uh huh.
something. It's okay. I want it like the character will or the player will say how they do it. I'm going to do this, and I'm like, that's interesting. Let's roll for it. Okay, and then I'll say if you pass, and I don't go into detail. I just
Right.
say
Right.
if you
But
pass, then you get this. If you fail, then this happens. And then sometimes they'll be like, I don't like how that do it. And maybe it is kind of like what you were talking about the dog coming in or something. But they'll be like, man, that's really harsh consequence. Like if I fail,
and you're like,
it's a
yeah,
really rough
it's a
thing.
tough world, right? Exactly. Uh huh.
Yeah. Um, so I think usually when we play, that's where the negotiation.
Well, I think that if the way you're describing it there isn't very negotiatory, because the is as if the player is not stating an action as in the sense of I initiate this, my character wants to do this, they say this is what I want to do and initiates it. It seems to me as though this is more of a discussion of understanding the environment that we're in, understanding the way that the world will push back on certain activities. And so I think for the non-combat situation, that there is some sort of direct place where you say, here, I want to and I'm going to do it. Right? As I'm going to, my character is moving into doing this. Um, and so in your non-combat situation, the transition from I'm trying to figure out what is an effective thing to do here, transitioning into, well, I'm going to do this. Um, I think you probably have a lot of clarity about that at the table, right?
Mhm.
I mean, when you're talking about that particular transition in a non-combat situation, I doubt that you're encountering sort of that weird, oh, but I was doing this, sort of
Right.
hitchiness. And if you're not encountering that, then there must be some kind of phrasing. There must be some sort of way it is said at the table where you shift from the character's speculative, I wonder if I should do this, into, no, this is what I do. And I know I'm talking about it from the standpoint of inside the character's head when we're really talking about the player making the decision. But on the other hand, when that player makes that decision, this has to be understood in terms of what characters are doing. So when that process is going on, do you just suspend the fiction? You just suspend it. Everybody freezes while we chit chat about difficulties. Is that the case? In my game Troll Babe, I actually call this free and clear. There is, at the initiation of a conflict, a suspension. And now everybody gets to say what everybody's going to do, and no character initiates it. We have only, by the end of that phase, established intent, and we know it's over, and we move into the execution, the initiation and execution of it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it may be that you do this already in some fashion with this. Um, and so if it's not a problem, then I suggest, it's just not, and we don't have to worry about it. And as you say, you typically don't have this particular step in terms of a more detailed confrontation or violence, you know, or probably anything of that kind. Um, so that's not the one I was the most concerned about. The one I'm the most concerned about was the one at the end.
Mhm.
But it is still an issue, right? I mean, it is still an issue of uh, especially if somebody says something quite direct. So there's no how about or what if or I wonder if at all. They say quite directly, I grab that rope and I give it a good sharp yank. And I'm hoping to, you know, picked a bad example. Something there's a thing that the player wants to do, by yanking
Right.
that rope, whatever it is. And you
Uh-huh.
then say, oh, consequences. Yeah, if you do that, that'll be great. By the way, the difficulty is like this. You're going to be rolling against, a D10. And the player goes, whoa, hands off that rope. Okay, do you see how that's a total take back?
Mhm.
Because there's no way for
Yeah.
that suddenly to have become evident to that character right at that moment. And the player had already gone for grabbing that rope. So, under what circumstances do we say this is initiated? What you're doing is initiated. You have initiated the action. Um, and again, I suggest that in many a role playing group, that people have so much trouble with this that they deliberately avoid it. They sort of play in a way that kind of walks around it without actually ever having a good procedure for it. Or everybody just kind of avoids saying anything that would cause any trouble along these lines. So it often means that nobody initiates anything. Um, that can devolve into either the game master pretty much just placing all the different things in everybody's hands. Oh, by the way, here's the rope. You could pull that. Or or what or very murky circumstances where everybody is shouting actions, but nobody knows which actions have actually been initiated or not. And it's not,
Mhm.
quote, a combat situation, so there's no way. I mean, I've actually had people roll initiative for a bunch of different non-combat actions in games that have an initiative order based on a roll. It's always really shocking to the players. I want to do this. Oh, I'm going to do that. Okay, well, I'm going to run up here. I'm like, guys, you're all just shouting different shit. There's no way to determine like who's doing what when, and it kind of matters for a number of reasons. So I'm going to just roll everybody roll initiative, and then we're going to find out the order in which you do all that stuff. And it's kind of shocking to some players who are kind of used to manipulating those moments of confusion.
Yeah, I see.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is that we want less of that confusion. So when
Mhm.
is it that the player goes backwards and says, "Oh, well, I don't do that. I'm going to do something else." And when does it feel like going backwards? Grabbing the rope, and then you say the consequences, and then he says, "Oh, I don't grab the rope." That's totally going backwards, right? I mean, that is the statement was assertive. The desire on the part of the player to do this, the character, you know, uh, is acting with determination to do this. And then we suddenly have this moment where the player has the option to just dial it all backwards. So I'm pretty sure that's not what you intended by that,
No,
right? And
right.
so the point is therefore, when does the initiation occur past which there is no rewrite? We are running with it. It is happening. And does everybody at the table understand that? So those are. Is this making any sense at all with
Yeah,
the?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So with this in mind, and also recognizing that you've got yourself some options about the Adharma points, what you actually do with them in terms of this particular conflict, is a very good question. I will say that with this many interesting and nuanced choices that funnel down into the dice for the havoc, with that many that are very assertive about who does what, and this happens then, and this
Mhm.
occurs, and then that guy jumps in, and stuff like that going on, that disrespecting your havoc roll, right? Disrespecting that die roll by having it modified retroactively in any way is kind of disrespecting the entire chain of decisions that meant those two dice got rolled. And if you didn't want the dice rolls to be those two dice outcomes to be as assertive as all that, then why are we rolling them in the first place? Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing that I try to get across, and I think how we play with that is that whenever you generate these Adharma, whenever you because you don't have them, you generate
Yes, I
them
understand that. Yeah.
by
Uh-huh.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So so everyone knows that doing that, it's like it changes fate, like it
Right.
wasn't supposed to happen, and everyone knows that's going to change the game. It's going to make the game darker for
Sure.
every single point.
Later
So
on,
it's like a
sure.
heavy
I'm fine with
right,
later
right,
on. I'm good with that.
mhm,
But I'm talking about the action right now.
right.
I'm talking about this action right now. I'm talking about the crashing down of that bow, or the rebelling of the spirits, or the fact that the decaying zombie dog got a lock on my ankle. um, and a great deal and a great deal of play at the higher levels, right? How darkening, how dark is thing are things getting, and whether the player is going to, some player is going to frame the next scene, and all those kind of larger scale, moving into different, phases of play things. I'm actually saying, you know what? No, I am getting down and dirty right now. I am talking about when I'm fighting the zombie dogs. I'm talking about whether my failure, um, which perhaps was a critical failure, and the we're ways away from the conclusion of the conflict in terms
Hmm.
of the
Right.
the points, and you say, well, dude, yeah, that one when he caught up with you and bit you, you were running as fast as you could with everybody else toward the gate, but you are flat out. You went down on your face because it got your ankle and it yanked your ankle and it's not letting go either. I mean, it's a zombie dog. What do you expect, right?
Right.
So, and there you are, face first on the pavement. Next person's turn. I don't know about you, but if I have the option to suddenly say, oh, I'll take a reroll on that, I am not happy. I mean, I might have been seduced by the reroll and I might have normalized to it during play, but I think play has become very thin at that point. That there is a writer's room quality at that point. That we're thinking about the bigger arc, man, you know, instead of this fight, these characters, these actions. At this particular moment of my character's, attention on my character.